I'm Lance Lambert. Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Vehicle Show. We are in Lynnwood, Washington at Street Rod Visions. This is a rod shop that builds some of the greatest cars in the Pacific Northwest. A lot of our viewers wonder, how does something like this end up looking like this? That's an incredible step from one to the other. There's all kinds of things that go on to make a car go from a rust bucket to a show winner. We're going to find out about that today. And who's going to tell us that? Well, Magic Martin, the owner of Street Rod Visions, is here today. How you, Magic? How you doing?
Doing good. Doing good.
Cool shop. How'd this come about?
Thank you. A friend of mine that I was doing some metal work for back in '04 asked me if I'd like to open a shop and said he would back me, and I brought in the customers and stuff, and here we are. We're still building hot rods.
So his or her money and your talent, and here we are today.
Well, something like that. And then we just progressed and got bigger and bigger, and we're now here and trying to do the best we can do and keep moving up the ladder.
All right. Well, we want to find out how something like that ends up something like this. So can we take a look in the
shop?
You bet.
Come on in.
There's obviously a lot of activity going on here. You have paint booths, you have cars in all sorts of disarray and various levels of completion. When you start with something like we saw out front, that 38 Chev that most people would just throw the rest of the dirt on it in the field that they found it in and let it sink into the ground.
Absolutely.
How's that start? How does somebody look at something like that that just is rust everywhere and decide that they can make a show-winning show car out of this? What's the process?
Well, most of the time they'll call me up and say, hey, I've got this old car and I think it's just beyond saving, but I really want to build a hot rod. So they'll call me up and say, hey, can you come take a look at it? And I'll come out to their house and do basically what I call the field estimate and take a look at it and look over the structure of the car and see if it's actually sound. And then if we make that determination that the car is still solid, and savable, we'll either load it up on the back of our trailer, bring it down here, and start taking it apart and find the parts that are missing and the parts that are good, and just start, putting patch panels together, like this car right here.
Which is pretty unusual. It's a hearse.
The 1940 Buick Cathedral Hearse, one of one. It's extremely rare, and this was actually built by the Flexible Flyer Company. The body on this one is still have all its wood structure inside, and there's a few rotted spots here and there, but we found a guy that's been doing the wood restore he's 80 some years old now, and he just finished the door on the back of this for us, and we're trying to get all the original type of oak back into it. And it has big cathedral style Pantages aluminum casted windows, so it's going to be kind of cool, and it's going to supposedly go into a museum. So this one is going to be a nice piece, and this is kind of where they start. And you can see the rust repair and stuff in some of these lower panels and some of the areas here and stuff. But we'll make all the new panels for it, hand fabricate them, and weld them in, and then we'll move on to the next stage.
I'm not a novice at this kind of stuff, but I'm also not good at it. And I see this or the stage prior to this, and it's just overwhelming. For you guys, my favorite saying is, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So is it that kind of situation where you just start, rather than being overwhelmed with what you have to do, you just start doing it?
Yep, just pick an area and start on the car, something that's mostly sound. Like this one here, the firewall had been just cut apart and hacked out, so there was a missing part. So we had to get a donor car and try to find one that had the original parts. We weld that section in and get the structure back to being a sound structure so that we can start taking apart some of the main pillars and repairing the areas that are in need of work, and then just slowly kind of work around the vehicle, and until you get it far enough along to where it actually can be put on a frame and start moving forward.
Do you have anybody come in that they tell you what they want and it's the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard and you have to break the news to them, or it's their money, you do what they need?
No, not usually. Most of the time they come in and they ask kind of for our help. They have a vision kind of how they want the vehicle to end up. So it's our job to be able to kind of draw it out and think inside of their minds of what they're thinking, and put it on paper and come up with a particular vision of the finished car. And how we get there, usually they rely on us to make sure that's done correctly. For the most case.
If they want crushed velour interior with white piping, do you sort of, or things like that, do you go, well, okay, or have you ever thought about maybe doing this instead?
Yes, try to steer them a little bit on something that sounds like it might be a non-selling item if they ever had to sell the vehicle in emergency situations. It may not sell, it may be hot right now for this particular period of time, but 10 years from now, it may be so out of style that anybody's just wondering why it was ever done. So we try to steer them a little bit straighter on thinking that maybe that's probably not the way to go. And most of the time, the customers will listen to us and understand that, oh, you guys have been doing it, this is what you do. I was never into the hearses, but this one here, as old as it is, and being that it's only a one of one, actually kind of drew my attention, and my interest in doing this vehicle and stuff. And the person that owned this vehicle, this is his first attempt at doing an old car. He's done a lot of 50s and 60s cars and restored them, but this one he says he's had more fun and more enjoyment out of doing this old vehicle, and that gets me excited. So this one, being that it was built by the Flexible Flyer Company, and they don't even have record of it, really got me excited.
And this is the Flexible Flyer people that make the sleds and that sort of thing?
Sleds that we used to slide on down the hills and stuff in the snow. Yep.
How did they go from sleds to hearses back to sleds?
I think probably because these originally were made out of wood on the inner structures and stuff, and that they did a lot of oak wood on the tops of the sleds and stuff, that maybe there was a meld, or at that time, maybe it was slow in business and stuff, and they said, hey, we need the business, so let's take it in, I don't know.
They made one.
Yep,
so
they made one.
They changed their mind.
Yeah.
We're at the next stage, right, in the construction of a car. This particular one, a 48 Buick four-door sedan, not something you normally see people street rod up. So.
Not usually. It's probably only, second four-door that I know that anybody's put as much time into it as we have. This one was bought brand new in 1948 by the grandpa of the customer that we're doing it for, and they've had it for forever in the family. And then the car was stored in Montana, up on top of the mountain pass over there, and they boxed and crated it up back in '62 or '63, and it sat there for the rest of its life until the crate fell apart. And so they called us up, and we met them at a street rod show at the Seattle Roadster Show, and talked with them about it. And one thing led to another about us doing the car. They trailered it over, and here it is.
This is a great example of probably they made that choice just because it was their grandfather's car and it's come through the family. Normally they wouldn't have went out and sought a 48 Buick four-door sedan.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of warm and fuzzy wrapped up in that.
Yes. The owner of it, he's 6'5", so he gave us a couple parameters of what we couldn't do to the vehicle and everything else we could do. And chopping the top was one of them because he was so tall. So in normally situations, the things that he said to us was, I know you can't make this thing fast, he says, but can you make it cool? So that was our challenge, to take on a four-door and try to do that for him. So it's, again, taking on the challenge and making it a goal.
What is it that you're doing to this to make it cool?
Well, this one originally, he said that he wanted a big block motor in it. So we went a 502 big block. That was the trend at the time when we started the project. And we're doing a 700R transmission. He said the car has to do 90 miles an hour and has to be able to smoke the tires. So those were our two parameters that we started with, and we had to find a drivetrain that would cover both of those areas. And the 502 big block definitely can handle smoking the tires, and the 700R custom transmission should handle it fine and not tack the motor out on the freeways over in Montana.
Parts for 48 Buick four-door sedans aren't
a lot of.
They'd even be lucky to find them on eBay, I would think.
The only thing we've had luck with was we found another grill because we were missing a few parts off of the grill work. So we did find one of those. We've eliminated a lot of the chrome, let it in the chrome strippings on the top of the hood. We're going to let in and put Hagen's French headlights into it. We're going to custom build a visor for it to kind of give it that look like it's a chop. So right now it's in the mock-up stage of just in cardboard. We've smoothed out the firewall. We've done the rebuild on the whole front suspension, put drop spindles onto it. And then there's a lot of work in the back end that he came to me about halfway through the build and says, I want to win a trophy. He says, you keep talking about all these other cars that you've been winning trophies, and he says, I want to win a trophy. So I said, okay. I said, well, these are a couple things that I think that we need to do, and let's talk about it.
Obviously not stock. We have a trunk lid opening sideways. I haven't seen that done on these before. A fender that's been resculpted and obvious changes here. What's going on?
Well, this is back to the part of the customer coming to me about halfway stage and says, I want to win a trophy. And leaving it completely stock is not going to probably blow up the judges' trophy lines of going, yeah, this thing deserves one. So I talked to the customer and said, that we probably need to revamp a few things. And this car here came stock with the hood opening sideways. So I told him, I said, well, if the hood opens sideways, the trunk has to open sideways. So I said, let me engineer the design on it, and I'll work with my fabricator, Mark, and we'll come up with some design and make this thing pneumatic so you can push a button and have it open up the hood and open up the trunk and have them both go in opposite of each other. And, it'll definitely stand out at the car shows. And then, of course, on the other side, used to have the gas tank door used to be in the fender well. Well, we eliminated that, and the actual light system we built and designed and Frenched our own unit in and took them out of the back of the car and built our own system. And this will be the piece that'll sit in here, and this will actually open up for the gas tank door. So it'll be a hidden unit.
Sort of a 56 Chev.
Yes.
All right, magic. I'm going to ask you, what is the magic? Why is it that car people can walk around at a car show and walk by something that has $400,000 put into it and blood, sweat, and tears? They'll walk right by it, and the next car they come to has $70,000 put into it, and they'll just stop and be glued to that car. There'll be a crowd around it. What is the magic?
Good question. I think a lot of time is picking out a color combination, if it's a two-tone or a single stage, that getting that right with the wheels and getting the right custom mods that you've done to a car and not going past pushing the envelope. Pushing the envelope, you have to know when to say when, and catching all of those elements together is what makes people, stop at a car and really look. So that's my answer to that.
Yeah, works for me. We are at the next stage. What do we have here?
We have a 1940 Ford pickup truck, and it's got a little 39 grill and stuff in it. She just liked the symmetry again to the lines, not having the extra stuff on it. But this one is in kind of the body stage and getting body work done on it. And then trying to get ready for paint. So this is kind of the next step of finishing up those lines and things and checking up underneath the rack and making sure that everything's bolted in correctly and stuff before the bodywork is completely blocked out.
Mm-hmm. We have metal here, we have fiberglass here, and on the fenders.
Yes.
Tell me about that. The questions would be, you have metal and fiberglass on the same body. Does that create any issues as far as the finish work and the paint? Also, I know some people are so purist that, I don't want any fiberglass, or they're so proud because their car has no fiberglass in it. What's your thoughts on all that?
Sometimes the customer says, I don't have a lot of money to go out and search and find a decent set of steel fenders. And then the rust repair that needs to be done on that particular set of fenders ends up blowing the cost over what they could afford. So they opt for the least expensive way to go, and sometimes that is fiberglass. It creates some problems for getting the blocking and the painting to come out right, because fiberglass doesn't lay down as smooth as it does, a metal panel. So it does cause problems in the long run, but sometimes it's all about dollars and cents. So
when you're finishing something up like this, I would think the prep work for the final skim coat or whatever and primer and paint is going to be different from the metal to the fiberglass. But Is that true? And then at the next stage, then is everything the same? You're treating them both the same, both at the same time, and the block sanding at the end, and the wet sanding, is it the same on the fiberglass and the metal?
Yes, for the most part it is. You need to make sure that you don't break through the gel coats that are here. The gel coats are a protective surface to protect the fiberglass strands that are on the inside, and once you break through that, can be a real problem, so you need to re-gel coat those areas if you break through. So roughing up the surface enough to be able to get primer onto it so that you can start blocking out the surface just like you would do the steel parts is the most critical stage, and a lot of people make that mistake and sand through the gel coat and think it's okay and primer through, and then what happens is the gel coat starts lifting in those edges, and then you end up having blotch problems, which you see at a lot of the car shows, and they see the spots showing up on fiberglass pieces.
Magic, we were talking about paint jobs. We're in the paint booth. We were talking about employees and rod shops. We have one right here. Mark Anderson, thank you for being on the show. The whole hobby with the television shows that are on, all the shops and building cars and all that, the employees in these shops have kind of emerged as stars in these shows, where I think in the past they were just guys that were body guys that worked in a body shop. Now I think there's a sort of an aura about guys that work in hot rod shops. Do you run into that? Do you have like hot and cold running women throwing themselves at you because you work in a rod shop? Or
it's not quite that good.
Yeah.
But yeah, at least now you get a little more credit for the work. It used to be it was just a shop, but now they appreciate the workers and people a lot more than they used to.
I would think that in years past you would be at a party and somebody'd say, what do you do? And well, I'm a body fender guy, I work at Fred's shop or whatever, and they'd go, oh, and that'd be end of conversation. Now it's like, oh, well, I was watching that show, and do they really do this? And do you guys really fight all the time and throw bumpers at each other? And do you get any of that?
Yeah, you do quite a bit. People are wondering, not so much the fighting, they figure that stage, but they figure, what does it really take? I mean, it looks pretty easy or looks pretty hard, and they want the scoop, and of course they're always asking to help out on theirs.
Sure,
side effect there.
We're in the paint booth. What's going on in here? How are they prepped before they come in here, and what happens when they're in here?
Well, this one we take and turn on the fans and take an air nozzle and blow the car out completely, all the nooks and crannies, to make sure that there's no particles of dust to float out onto the paint. And we'll start taping off all the sections that are preserved for the different colors that are going on this, and then they'll take it to final stages. They'll take and wax and grease remove any fingerprints or any spots of dust that is on the car, and get ready to shoot.
All right, Magic, we are at the next step, right?
Yes.
What do we have here besides something very unusual that you don't see at all?
This is a 29 DeSoto, first year of the DeSoto. This one, our customer was a teenager when he helped his father put this away in a plastic bag in the garage, and 45 years ago. So it was real important for us to be able to try to keep the original paint and the way it was when it was stored away. The only thing he wanted to do was get rid of the 4-cylinder motor and the wood wheels and get it updated to where him and his wife could actually drive the car and have total technology, smooth driving, and have it dependable, but keep it the way his father had it.
The paint on this was as it was back then, and this isn't a great paint job, but it tugs at his heart, so he wants it on there.
Yep, exactly. I mean, there's still pitting and stuff underneath the paint and everything, but it's survived those 45 years, and now that's what we're trying to do, is trying to restore and save all this with doing just the updates that we needed to finish the vehicle.
This particular 29 DeSoto, or whatever might be sitting here, they aren't looking to win the Grand National with this or the Detroit show. They just want something that's fun. I really like the way the hobby has gone in the recent years, a lot with the rat rod influence, where just get the thing working right and enjoy it. Don't spend your time at shows picking rocks out of the tread and the tire and getting underneath on your back with a squirt bottle of Windex. Just get out there. It doesn't have to be a $40,000 paint job. It doesn't have to be a $200,000 restoration. Just get a car out there and enjoy it.
Absolutely agree with you. being the owner of this shop, everybody thinks that I've got some custom cool hot rod that is just perfect. It's not the case. I have a 33 Chevy, and it is just my driver, and I have fun in it. And I think that is more important of just being on the streets and enjoying the hobby, and saying hi to the friends and stuff, and bringing these cars back is what makes my day.
This paint job brings up the question of, we all know you can go out and get paint jobs for $500. Maybe not the best choice to make, depends on the vehicle, I suppose. But you can also go out and get paint jobs for $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. And I think that the average acceptable paint job for your daily driver probably starts at around $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 now. But what is it? What's the difference between a $5,000 paint job and a $35,000 paint job? What on earth could make that much financial difference?
It has a lot to do with the prep. A lot of the edges are let go. People don't sand underneath the lip edges and stuff, where you see it on the top, but there's Bondo globs underneath the bottom and stuff, and primer that doesn't have top coat on it. The jams are not done into the doors and stuff, or sanded through. The amount of wet and dry sandpaper of doing a 1,000 grit, a 1,500 grit, a 2,000 grit, of trying to make the finish a complete, smooth paint show vehicle is the difference. Is just man hours, lots of man hours.
Mm-hmm. There are car shows on television, a couple that a car comes in and a week later it's done. And I have friends. I have one friend who his car has been in a shop now for 7 years. So what happens there? Why the two extremes?
Well, what they don't show you on a lot of those shows is they have 24 or 25 guys working around the clock, 24/7, and a lot of the stuff is donated to them. Where these customers are actually having to pay for the parts, and it gets expensive to do these, and the amount of labor hours that it takes to do these, it takes a lot longer. If you've only got 1 or 2 men on a car, it can take you 6 to 8 months to do a vehicle. Or if you have 25 people, you can work, everybody's taking one fender, one door, one thing, and they can actually just get it done by themselves without having to have somebody else's help and stuff. So it takes a lot of labor to do these, and if you have that many people, they can get it done really fast. Plus, a lot of times, a lot of the stuff's not finished, so.
I don't know there's an answer to this question, but if somebody brings in, say, the 55 Ford that's stock and pretty reasonable condition, but it needs refurbishing, it needs paint and minor body work and just kind of, an average middle-of-the-road restoration, the average shop, if they focus on that car, a couple of people working on it, is that 6 or 7 months away, you're going to get your car back, or is there kind of a standard that?
It usually takes about 4 to 6 months to do an average build if they're not going to throw a lot of custom stuff into it. If they're going to throw custom stuff into it, it's anywhere from 6 months to a year to finish that out. Occasionally you'll have a car that is just everything is completely one-off and custom made, where those can push off into the 2-3 year type of projects and stuff, but they're expensive.
Mm-hmm. What's the perfect customer, the perfect client?
One that wants to do a hot rod or a custom, and comes in and says, "This is my car. What can you do for it?" and sees it through. That's the perfect customer.
Magic, we started the show talking about cars in this condition. We're ending the show talking about the finished product, a gorgeous show car. This particular 40 Ford, and many of your other completed projects can show well at any car show in the country or the world. The final stage, what's that feel like? How did it get to this, the actual finished product?
Just seeing it every day, having the team be able to pull this off is probably the most important. I couldn't have done it by myself, but being able to see it drive away or see it at a car show just makes it all worthwhile. Getting it to that right level that the customer was hoping for.
Are you glad to see it go away, thank goodness we're done with that car, or is there a little bit of, sending your child off to college and you're proud but you're a little heartbroken at the same time?
Proud but heartbroken. Hope it doesn't get wrecked. I don't want to see it. I'd love to see it just last like this forever, and so the customer, every time he takes and shows it, it's it's the way it was when he picked it up, and that's the most important thing. But it's a little scary.
Well, it hasn't been scary here today. I want to thank you for inviting us out here to Street Rod Visions. What a wonderful shop, wonderful host, and you have been wonderful viewers. Thank you very much for watching the show, and we will see you again next time. See you then. Bye-bye.